Hey, what's going on, everybody? It's BDF 44 coming at you with another video. All right, so I kind of want to just react to the top 75 list. I didn't write them all down, I don't have them all in my head. I'm just going off the fly right now, just thinking of what I saw there and kind of the controversial names, that were on there, and then some of the names that are going around that were not on there that's really popular. So that's kind of how I'll approach it and leave it up to you guys to go check out the list. But I just think at the end of the day, it's very difficult in this era to kind of pick the next 25 best players to ever play the game, and you got to consider some of the guys who got snubbed in the 50. You got to put them on there. So you got to find guys in this era that a lot of us have been alive to see, and that's the tricky part. It's like we aren't going to really argue the greatest 50 players from 25 years ago. But once you start throwing on some names since, it's like, we watched some of them guys. Nah, you can't leave this person off. Nah, how can you leave that person off? And it's a lot of that going on right now, as I'm sure the NBA knew would happen. But one of the noteworthy snubs, I think that one of the biggest noteworthy snubs is Dwight Howard's name. He's not on there. Um, and it's one of the names that you will see on there that's kind of questionable for a lot of people is Dame Lillard. And I weigh their resumes against one another, and they're both 1A guys from their eras. Different styles of play, but both have the same responsibility on their shoulders to carry franchises. And I look at Dame and I say, well, he's won some playoff series, right? At the buzzer in spectacular fashions, put up Hall of Fame numbers. We know he's going to get his jacket. All-star teams, he'll make one this year probably, I'm sure. And then you look at Dwight Howard, you say his resume is crazy. They started looking at his resume with all the different accolades: championship, 8 times defensive this, rebounding this, blocks leader here. His resume is just very, very long and very decorated. And it tops off with a championship in 2020, and it's just like, you remember them 8 years that he dealt, did his part in Orlando, and was not only a defensive force but an Iron Man there. Um, Rebounding force. He was the best shot blocker in the league for many years in a row. He was the best defensive player in the league for many years in a row. He was the best rebounder in the league many of those years in a row. He's led that team to an NBA Finals as the main defensive stand player on the team. I mean, they really didn't have many defenders on the team, period. The whole thing was revolved around him. I mean, I just don't know if in my right mind I can honestly say that list looks great without his name on it. Is And they did add a 76 name. I guess they said that there was a tie somewhere. They didn't tell us which name it was, but somewhere in the voting there was a tie, so they just added a 76th name. Another name on there that I had to think long and hard about was Steve Nash. I like Steve Nash, but he didn't do a lot of winning for me. Not for me, but I'm saying, for looking at his name on that list, I'm looking at statistics. It's kind of like, I think some guys are on that list. It's arguable that their one single championship kind of got them over the hump, put them on this list. But then you look at other guys who may have a championship or 2 or 3 and great opportunities to display an argument for this thing, and may have not been put on there, like a Klay Thompson, who said, he may be naive in his mind, but he feels like he's one of the 75 greatest players ever play. And a lot of people are inclined to agree. I think it's tough because he's never been a 1A. Just by sheer default, he was drafted into the situation and stayed in it, but he was always behind Steph. And I think it's kind of docking him to a degree. But then I look at Scottie Pippen's name, it's not docking him. He was the number 1 defensive player on that Bulls team, won 6 championships. So maybe they, I don't know. But Klay Thompson with 3 championships is one of the greatest shooters of all time, arguably top 4 shooter to ever play the game. I think he's a top 4. It's up there with a couple of guys. I just felt like he, with those championships, with his defensive elite status, I felt like he should be on that list too. I felt like Klay Thompson should have been on that list over a guy like Dame Lillard. He's accomplished more. He has. Uh, he should be on there in that regard. I think some people that were left off: T Mac, uh, Tony Parker, and Manu Ginobili were both left off. That didn't sit right with me. Looking at Dame's name, looking at Steve Nash's name, I don't know. Some people didn't feel too good about AD getting on that list. I understand them. Like I said, one championship. I don't know. Been on some bad teams for a long time. Paul Pierce, one championship. Played on some bad teams. Is the 1A guy for a long time. Um, it was good to see that they put Dominique Wilkins on there because he was the main snub. I remember that from when I was a little kid. Everybody thought that was some bull crap. So he was able to make 75. That was automatic. Love the fact that James Worthy was on that list. I'm pretty sure he was in the 52, but it's just good to see certain names. Lakers, a lot of Lakers. Got Carmelo made the list. That one's arguable because he didn't do a lot of winning, but he's such a great, prolific scorer. I look at him like certain guys like James Harden, Russell Westbrook. They've done so much statistically. I guess Steve Nash fits in that category too for his MVP years. So I understand putting him in there based on them stats. Those stats are they're too much. You can't deal. But then you look at a guy like Dwight Howard. I say, well, his stats and his trophies from all NBA teams, all defensive teams, he got so many different medals for various things that he's done. It's like, nah, his resume is too strong to not be on that list. NBA, I know y'all want to dock him for how things went in Orlando, right? But he should be on there for sure. I saw some people not feel too good about Yao Ming's name not being on there based on what he's done internationally and what he was able to bring to the game in a short period of time. I don't know. I look at him in that list of players like Brandon Roy, like they're just, incomplete. Just injuries robbed us of how great they were. But to the eye test, you best believe they were both Hall of Famers in my mind. Same with Grant Hill. I think he was left off that list. Same thing. He wasn't short of a Hall of Famer. He just didn't have longevity based on injuries at that high level. Derrick Rose, same thing. Incomplete. Just didn't get long enough of a prime at that level for us to put him on this list. Vince Carter, however, was left off the list. I don't feel good about that. When I look at Dame, here we go again. I hate to pick on Dame, but he's the name that's kind of the one that everybody's looking at saying, come on now, like, I'm thinking about a guy like that, and I'm saying, damn well Dame ain't done what he's done. He ain't. He just hasn't. Tony Parker, same thing. Like, I love what Dame has done, and I think in other situations he would accomplish as much, if not more, because of how cold he is in terms of his cold-blooded nature. What he accomplished in those playoff series, hitting those shots. You can't deny that. Nobody's denying that. But for me, I can't feel good about some of those names left off of there. I just can't do it. Oh, excuse me. So, yeah, man, that's where I'm at with that. Just looking at it, I think who you played for had something to do with it. I think guys kind of were able to benefit in some cases from where they were able to be stars at. I always say if Carmelo Anthony did all that he did in a Sacramento King uniform, I don't know that he makes this list. I'm just going to be real with you. Even though he's a prolific scorer, I'm looking at some of these other resumes, even his teammate Dwight, I'm not sure that he's actually a more decorated player than Dwight Howard. I'm not sure of that. Given how much losing the New York Knicks team's doing, I'm not certain of that. But he's one of the great prolific scorers. It's no question that he makes a fantastic argument, and he's not the first name I would be looking to make a decision on. But he's one of them for me where it's like, boy, that New York, that helped. Being in New York helped a lot. I think as it pertains to something like this, and some of the stuff that happened just in general. I think playing for the Knicks kind of shed a positive light on him for a long time. That's a good thing. So, yeah. So yeah, that's what I wanted to say, man. It was a couple names. I'm sure there was others. I'm so sure there were other names that we didn't mention. Sean Kemp was a name that didn't get put on there that I saw some people talk about. man. They put Giannis on there. I was certain that after that NBA Finals performance, um, there was no question he would be on that list. You know, had that performance not taken place, I don't know that he's on that list necessarily, even though he has a couple MVPs. But the fact that he just won that championship, we all saw how ridiculously dominant he was. That was enough. That was definitely enough for me. I'd have put him on there too. Yeah, but Kyrie Irving, that's the name, man. Kyrie Irving. I knew I was on this camera for a little while longer for a reason. They didn't put Kyrie on that list. Kyrie Irving. That's the number one name that I saw. Dwight Howard was the one that was most deserving for me, so I saw it a lot and mentioned it first. But Kyrie was the number one name that people are talking about, and I think a lot of that has to do with, first of all, we all know that that's about 75 people on that list that can't dribble better than him. And that's about 75 cannot dribble better than him, and about 50 of them ain't gonna be able to finish the way that he does. He's got two things in his bag that just makes him an elite all-time basketball player alone. And given the fact that some of those players on that list are on that list because they're good at things that Kyrie does, and they don't have any championships, and he has one, particularly in the fashion that he won his, and the fact that he's got all this stuff, controversy going on with his name. A lot of people feel uncomfortable about him not being on that list, but I would tell Kyrie the same thing I said in this camera. That's on Kai, because I don't think any of that. I don't think anybody can deny his basketball play, but it's just like some of those other names I said that were robbed by injury. We got a small sample size, brother. Some of these names that you're going up against, these guys have longevity. Now, granted, Vince Carter throws that argument out the window, and I can argue he should be there off of longevity alone, and him not being there is ridiculous. But for Kyrie Irving, it's like, your argument is that you won a championship on your shot. You helped LeBron James get a championship in Cleveland. There's no way you shouldn't be on that list. You know, Chris Bosh, I didn't see him on that list either. Some would argue he should be on that list for that reason. So, but that Kyrie thing, I just think is very controversial because of what we got going on right now. And ultimately because we all know he's got one thing that others just simply cannot do. It's sort of like Klay Thompson's shooting ability. Yeah, that's about 74 people that can't shoot better than him. And Klay Thompson on this list. So, I get it, man. I get it. But it's only 76 at the end of the day. They added one. And I'm here to tell you that they probably would have did best to just do this in a different era. Let some of the names that are on the list finish playing. Like, honestly, some of these guys, you just got to see the rest of their careers play out. I want to see how Dame's career play out. Because if he gets in the right situation and starts winning championships, then there's no question of whether or not he belongs on here. I saw CP3's name. I like CP3 on this list, but I can make an argument that, you don't feel as comfortable. He's up there with the Steve Nash and Russell Westbrooks and some of those guys who haven't won it. You don't know if you feel 100% sure, you know what I mean? Because they're still playing. Chris Paul can still win it. I don't think you remove Chris Paul's name from this list because of how prolific he's been as a point guard in an era where point guards led the charge. He was the best point guard in the era where point guards were the premium. So I understand putting him there, but he has not won. He really hasn't. And a lot of people would not look at his name first, but yeah, I'm looking at it too. I'm looking at a lot of those guys that didn't win. But at the same time, it's like they all deserve to be there. It's just about who didn't make it so that the list we have is as it is. That's all. I would much rather this list be 100. Feel a lot better about it, to be honest. So, yeah, man. At the end of the day, the NBA is a nuanced league with a lot of different factors that play into why players were as you saw them to be. A lot of things had to come into place for those players to be who they were. And so circumstances sometimes can keep players from getting the most out of themselves, and maybe guys who were more talented, some of these guys on this list, just didn't get a chance to show you how talented they were because of their circumstances, which is why I made the channel I made, man, because I'm trying to lend a voice toward helping that situation in this league, shining a light on what it is that I see can maybe help that in some way. That's what I'm about. So hopefully, you know, it'll all work out in the end. But I'll say this much: looking at the list of names that voted, there was a lot of qualified people there voting for this list. I can say that much. I saw some real names there. Ironically enough, if I'm not mistaken, I saw a couple names who were on that list voting for this list, which I thought was kind of interesting. But at the end of the day, nobody's being removed. It's only people being added. So it just is what it is. But because of that, I just never really trust that we're in the right era for it at any given moment, to be honest with you, because it's just, when is it the right time to say, yo, this person's greater than that person and that's it? Like, I don't know. Are we the right people? Is this the right group of people? Is this the right time? Who knows? So this is what it is, man. I think they could scramble that list up, do that voting again, probably come up with different results in some cases. So what can I say, man? Some names didn't make it, and that sucks. Dwight Howard should have been there. I think T-Mac should have been there in some cases. Although I could argue if he would have made it, I may have said he didn't. So it's like, it's a lot of that going on too. Reggie Miller's response to making it was awesome. I like that. I really enjoyed seeing that he made the team and found out on live to air. They told him, and he had to take a second to really absorb that, because he didn't think he was going to make it. And in his mind, it's arguable that maybe, others would say that he didn't deserve to make it. But he said he put his resume up against anybody ever. You know what I mean? So he's very proud of that. I respect it. Reggie Miller, he held the Pacers down for many, many years. So top 4 shooter of all time. He was one of them names I was talking about in my mind. So yeah, I didn't dispute his name at all. But without a championship, you could totally see, you know what I mean? You could totally see why somebody may. But I didn't see no objections to that. Obviously glad to see AI made it. Jason Kidd made it. I didn't argue that at all. So if I'm not arguing Jason Kidd, I probably shouldn't argue Chris Paul. But the only thing separating them in my mind, ring. Chris Paul got to get it. So yeah, there's a lot of that going on. Gary Payton made the list. Very happy to see that. I don't know if he was on the top 50, but he deserved to be there. He should have been there. Kobe, of course. Ain't nobody keeping being out of anything. Tim Duncan, that was a no-brainer for me. KG, no-brainer. Just listing off some of the names that I remember seeing on the list. Tim Duncan, absolutely, no question about it. So, yeah, some good new names. Some questionable ones, but some really good, solid, they got it right names. KD, of course. You can't even have that list without KD. It's laughable without having him on there. So yeah, big fella Shaq, of course, because he was on 50 though. He was with the 50. He was the youngest player on the 50 greatest team. He had made that team. But yeah, man, that's what I got. Just wanted to let y'all know, man, that list is going to be talked about a lot over the next several days. And there's some people that made that list that are going to have to prove they deserve to be on that list this year. And it's going to make for even more to talk about. More locker room bulletin board material. Klay Thompson going to come back firing. He felt like he should have been on this list, and he going to remind people that, And I'll tell you something else. Like 4 out of 4 guys on that list are playing for the Lakers right now. And then there's a snub guy, Dwight Howard, who also plays for the Lakers right now. That's going to be an interesting kind of thing in theory. You don't have to be nothing. But I just wish Dwight was on that list for our chemistry as a team. It ain't right that he's not on that list. You know what I mean? Especially when his resume could really be better than some of those teammates. Look, I love AD, and I think AD is going to do great things. But up until this point, he hasn't done more than Dwight Howard. I'm just going to flat out say that. He hasn't. And Carmelo Anthony, I've already made that case that I think Dwight Howard probably is right there with Carmelo Anthony in terms of value in my mind. He should be there. So, we ain't gonna put him up against no Bron, That ain't happening. And I'm not putting hitting him up against Russell Westbrook either at this stage because of the stats. But Dwight should be there. He should be there probably over AD and probably over Melo. For me, Westbrook too, honestly. Westbrook too, given what Dwight has accomplished by himself as a A1 and the championship. So yeah, man, I don't know, man. I don't know. Dwight Howard is the one that really doesn't sit right with me. Yeah. Because at least if like Manu Ginobili's one too, but it's like he played off the bench. He was a third player, role player, that kind of thing. Another name that I thought was really interesting, Dennis Rodman. You know, I think Dennis Rodman is one of the greatest players that ever played this game. I do. And I think the intangibles and the things that he did out there made him simultaneously one of the greatest defenders of his era and also one of the greatest winners of his era. And of course, the greatest rebounder of his era and maybe second greatest rebounder ever played a game. Like, ever. And won some rings with the Bulls. Won plenty of rings. So, like, he's not the first name you're going to snatch away. But I think about his role, right? With the teams that he's played on. Great role, but it wasn't the number one guy. And in most cases, it wasn't even the number two guy. Okay? Let's put things in perspective. So I look at a guy like Klay Thompson. No way Dennis Rodman against Klay Thompson. Very different skill sets, but if you look at what they accomplished versus the roles that they've been in, couldn't I argue that Klay should be in there with Dennis? If Dennis got to be, so should Klay. You know what I mean? It's that kind of thing. So while I'm not removing Dennis, first or nothing crazy like this, about 10 names is going to have to go before Dennis. I still look at Dennis and say, his role, I could argue, can make it so that maybe some guys will say, I think I should be there before him based on their skill set and what they bring to the table if they're more of a all-around player. For example, if I'm somebody like Vince Carter, I didn't accomplish what Dennis Rodman did. I don't have the rings that Dennis did. But, like, I feel like I can hoop better than Dennis. You know what I mean? Like, overall, I feel like I hoop better than Dennis. Now, that doesn't mean that I can do what Dennis did or Dennis wouldn't overpower me or whatever. Or that I got more rings than Dennis, because I certainly don't. But it's like, you match me up as a ball player against him, yeah, I feel like I should be able to win that matchup. Like, I should be able to be more productive in my way, overall. So I don't know. Maybe some would disagree. Obviously, Dennis Rodman is just a name out of the bunch, but I just look at his style of play and just say he was really, really dominant, but he was really, really limited. Like, really limited. So that's the thing, when a guy like Dwight Howard gets snubbed, I'm like, well, hell, he had about the same limitations as Dennis Rodman. What he doesn't have is as many rings, but probably as many accolades, given all that he accomplished, rebounding the ball and blocking shots and being a defensive player of the year many, many times over. It's just, not to mention the longevity and the durability of a Dwight Howard. I don't know. I could argue that he deserved to be there just as much as Dennis does, based on what he did by himself as an A1, once again. So this argument can send you in a rabbit hole for a million different ways, a million different loops. Paul Pierce, a lot of people don't really love that Paul Pierce was on that list. I remember Paul Pierce as an A1 on a bad team doing significant things. That's the thing. So it comes down to stats for me and the championship. And the championship. Stats for me and the championship. Because he really did put down what would I consider to be an undisputable Hall of Fame career. Even though I wasn't a big fan, based on the fact I'm a Laker fan and all that, but there was no question that Paul Pierce was someone who was giving you his best in multiple categories every single night for a very long time. Leading a bad Boston Celtic team in the playoffs, hitting clutch shot after clutch shot after clutch shot after clutch shot. Like, I guess for me, it's just I haven't forgotten who Paul Pierce is. I kind of grew up in that era, so I know exactly how elite he was. and he was more elite than I think a lot of people know from this era, because just how he'd been on TV and some of the stuff that he said out of his mouth just makes people say, roll their eyes at Paul Pierce, honestly. But on the court, when he was in his heyday, I don't think there were 5 players more talented than him, really. Like during his particular era, he was just stuck on a bad Boston team. That's all it was. But he was literally one of the best players in the league every year. And it showed when it mattered most, not just during the regular season. He delivered in the playoffs, dragging bad teams there. So, yeah, man, not the biggest Paul Pierce fan, but I am somebody who remembers what he did. I haven't forgotten. Underrated superstar, definitely deserves to be on the 75. Ray Allen's on the 75. I thought that was another one you could say, Clay, whoa, hey, hold on now. Like, as much as Ray has accomplished, and Ray's elite, Ray's super elite. But if I'm Clay, I feel like I'm just as good as this dude. And I got more rings. I feel like that if I'm Clay. I'm definitely a better defender than him. Ain't no question about that. So, I get it. I get the concern. I get it. I think if some of them people who voted on that list saw the results of that list, they probably vote differently. I think it's a lot of that going on too. Like, I didn't know you were gonna do that kind of thing. So I don't know. But anyway, man, I've been talking about this for 26 minutes. I thank you all for watching. My name is BDO44.